Hey guys, thank you for joining another Mold Talks. Really appreciate the time here. We have another special guest as usual, and this one, her name is Vivian. And Vivian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, let people know why you're here.
Sure. My name is Vivian Rowan. I started a nutritionist business or, Instagram account too, just because I got mold poisoned severely, and so did my whole family. And I spent the last 2 years researching everything you can possibly learn about mold, how to get better, how to get out of your body, how to get my kids better, and how to spread awareness, because so many people don't connect the dots and realize how damaging it is to your health.
Totally. Yeah, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story here today. We may get into the weeds here a bit about what you've gone through, and it hopefully it's not too triggering. And I really applaud you for doing this, because I know that it's going to empower and help other people that have been through or are going through similar situations. It's important that we have this community of people that really to show that you're not alone, right? And what you're going through is real. And so thank you for helping me do this. Let's dive right in. When was it that you first noticed you weren't feeling well?
So we moved into this house, which is actually the same subdivision I'm in right now, but it was another house. And we moved in May 2018. And we actually lived there for like 8 months before I discovered it. But in that 8 months, there was also a flood on Easter Day. The whole basement flooded, and the people we bought the house from didn't tell us there was a ongoing flood issue there. And wow. So the house flooded. My husband just went down there and stuck like a big dryer from Home Depot and thought that was it. So the summer went by, and actually the air conditioning broke in the basement. That probably didn't help things out. And we didn't think anything of it. So after the summer, come August, the first thing I started noticing was I was like in my bedroom reading a book, and I went like this on my cheek, and I had like hives all over my face. And I was like, what on earth? And I like ran to the mirror, and I was like, oh my God. So, I just chalked it up to whatever, I'm allergic to something. And then a couple months later, I was walking down the staircase, and it was the first like ping in my fingers. So I was like, ooh, what's pinching me? And then I remember walking over to the kitchen faucet, and I turned on the water, and I couldn't tell if the water was hot or cold. I kept having these pings in my fingers, which later on I would learn is called neuropathy. And I remember going on a walk, and also it was like pinging. And I called my father, who's a physician. I was like, something's going on. I have hives. I have neuropathy in my hands. I don't know what's happening. And he was like, oh, it's probably just a virus. There's a bunch of stuff going around. So then, so those are the first things that went wrong. As time progressed, I couldn't work out. I remember I was at the gym, and I was on the elliptical, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Like my heart was like soaring through the roof for no reason. And I remember looking at my fingers again, because I had these pinching pains, but this time my veins were like a blackish blue. And that's still something no doctor's ever been able to like put together exactly. It was freaking me out. Like I was like, something is severely wrong. After that, nosebleeds occurred, and my son started getting nosebleeds daily. And that's when I was like, oh my God, something's happening. Like that's when so that was, I also missed a major event. August 1st, I met my girlfriends for lunch, and I couldn't breathe. I was driving to meet them for lunch, and I had my arms on the steering wheel. And I remember I couldn't lift my arms on the steering wheel. And I thought I was just going to pass out while driving. And by the time I got there, I was like, guys, I can't breathe. I don't know what's happening. I can't breathe. They called 911. It was so embarrassing. This is like a bunch of moms I was meeting for lunch. And, I go wheeled out on a stretcher. But I didn't go to the ER. Luckily, my father's a doctor, and he dialed in, and my oxygen was fine. So it was just a really, really high heart rate.
Wow.
So, but later on, I don't know how far you want me to go.
No, keep going. I mean, keep going until you kind of, I'm going to ask kind of, when did you figure out that it was mold? So if you'd like, you can just dial right into that and then kind of piece back together when you actually figured out that it was mold.
Sure. So let's see. So the nosebleeds was really when I stopped to think it's not just me. And that was really telling. I was like, okay, it's got to be my environment, because it certainly wouldn't be me and my kids. And then my kids started spiking a fever. They started spiking a fever of 100 degrees, 101 for like 2 or 3 months. And I was like, oh my God. But before we got to that point, we rewind. So once I realized I had the nosebleeds, my son has had the nosebleeds, I started to look at the home and I was like, and then it just hit me. I was like, oh my God, the flood over the summer. And I was like, I literally ran downstairs the same day I had the thought, and I pulled up the rug. It was instinctive. And there was black all under the rug, all around the room. And that's when I called a mold inspector out, and they went down there and they're like, yeah, there had to have been a flood, or something's constantly flooding because your whole basement's covered in black. And so they tested the air, and it was astronomically lethal levels of mold. But this is around the same time exactly when they came out that I was having choking spells. I could not breathe in the house. I have a Ring camera with all these videos of me running out of the house, like gasping for air, like couldn't breathe. I mean, so around the time that I couldn't breathe, having these constant choking spells, one of the remediators came back. Well, we had the air tested, but the remediator, Serpro, came over and he was like, look, if you were my wife, I would tell you to pack your bags tonight and get your kids. And he was like, 22,000 ketonium is lethal. He's like, you need to get out of here. Go to a hotel, go anywhere. And I was like, oh my God. And so I packed everything and we got out. And we stayed in hotels for like 6 months until we found another house. And when the remediators came to remediate, they cut open the drywall and it was like black, like like let's say 2 feet up all the way around the perimeter of the room. And yeah, we had like 22,000 ketonium in the air, 10,000 aspergillus. And those are really, really, really bad for your nervous system. And I'll get into how sick I got, with the next question, whenever you want to ask that.
Yeah. And for those listening, I mean, 22,000 per cubic meter is a lot of ketonium. It's something that I've never seen. And I've, visited over 1,000 homes. What's interesting about that is ketonium is a heavier mold, so you don't typically find it that much in the air test. So that's pretty remarkable. There must have been a massive colony present.
N44 Stachybotrys was in the air, which is even heavier.
It's even heavier. That's right. So it's another uncommon mold to find in the air. Typically, you usually find one spore or something when it's nearby, but 44 would be a good indicator that there's a pretty big problem. It sounds like you got that resolved, and glad you did so. And so just to kind of tie this back together, how long were you kind of dealing and living with this before you figured it out and fixed it? Was it a year, 6 months?
So part of the problem is there was a mold problem before we moved in, but that big flood of when I was living there just probably was the perfect storm that blew it up. So I would say in total, it was probably like 8 or 9 months. But after that flood, the main flood that happened, it was like 4.
Okay. And I can already tell this next question is going to be an interesting one because you mentioned some doctors in the family. But a lot of clients, they go from doctor to doctor, searching for answers before they, either finally find one that puts them in the right path, or, it could even be sometimes people doing research on their own where they start to kind of look into that. But, what was that journey like for you?
Oh, it was hell. And it still is hell for anybody who's going through it because nothing's changed. I saw 25 doctors. My father works at Emory here in Atlanta, and my sister works at Emory here in Atlanta. And Western doctors only view mold as asthmatic. It can give you asthma and allergy, and that's it. I got allergy tested 3 or 4 times, and it kept showing I was not allergic. But the allergist accidentally did an IgG on me, which showed high levels of Stachybotrys in my blood. So she actually did that on accident. It was like, whoa, I found something kind of weird. This just shows me you are exposed. And I'm like, well, why don't you do that for all the molds? Like, something's not
Yeah.
clicking with them. They're just not trained. So I went to about 25 to 30 doctors, including, of course, discussing with my father, my sister almost daily, to the point where they were just trying to get me on antidepressants because they thought I was depressed. This was before they truly understood how much mold was in my basement and how many remediators I got to put it in writing, and I made them read it. And then I sent them article after article after article. But anyways, going back to the doctors, I went to a pulmonologist. I had lung problems. I went to a cardiologist because my heart rate was through the roof. I went to multiple allergists. I went to a neurologist for my, and this is where I have to tell you a story, how bad the neuropathy got. It was really scary. But they basically thought I had, and I can never say this syndrome correctly, like Guillain-Barré, whatever it is, Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Okay.
And he was like, the only thing I can think of, this is like a top neurologist at Emory, and he's like, the only thing I can think of is you have a heavy metal toxicity of some point, but he's like, I've never seen this before. I don't know what's going on with you. I got tested for MS. That was ruled out. I mean, I went to any and every specialty under the sun, and nobody knew what I had. And I remember there was, I had like a urinary also infection, and I remember my OB was like, "Oh, it's never mold, it's never fungus, it's just bacteria." But he's like, "I'm not going to give you an antifungal." I went to my practitioner. I was like, "I think I have a fungal infection." And it's like you're speaking taboo. Nobody understands fungus. Nobody understands fungal infection. They don't talk about candida, which often comes accompanies when you have too much mycotoxins in your system. Your immune system gets whacked, and that's when candida can overgrow. You talk to any doctor about that, they think you're smoking crack. So, you know, it was a huge waste of money for 2 years. Oh, including my kid's pediatrician looked at me as if I was crazy. I told her about the mold, and she gave me 2 steroids and an inhaler for my son. And I was like, that's not cutting it. He has nosebleeds, like something major is wrong. And they're just like, I don't know what to tell you. And I'm so, long story short, I found a good integrative doctor here in Atlanta. I got my son to see her, and I saw her. And between her and Dr. Nathan Neal, which we did on Zoom, between the two of them, I got on the right track. But
Awesome.
it took a long time.
Awesome. Well, you know, I'm glad you're on the right track now, and sorry to hear about the sounds like 20 something doctors that you had to go through, these specialists who couldn't figure it out. But I'm glad you finally did figure it out and you found a good team around you. What were some of your symptoms? You touched on a little bit of it, but is there anything else you didn't touch on in terms of like what you were feeling or going through?
Yes, I had over 30 symptoms. And
wow.
When you go to anybody and you tell them you have over 30 symptoms, the first thing they're going to think is A, you're crazy, or B, you're depressed. Like that's how they're trained. They're just trained this way in medical school, unless you see an integrative or functional doctor. So the first week out of my house, I had to stay at my father's place because he's a physician. He could like keep an eye on me. I forgot the name of the syndrome, but it happens when you're extremely dangerously low in potassium. I'd have to Google it. But I was literally like convulsing, like I couldn't sit still. I was like going like this, and I had to be walking, couldn't sit still. And my father didn't know if it was a seizure type thing or what was happening. So I stayed under his supervision. He gave me like a painkiller, and we just was wait and watch. In the meantime, he took me to Emory, got every kind of blood test under the sun. But while I was at his house, that first week was the most crucial week because I was out of my place and I couldn't stop throwing up. I had extreme vertigo. I couldn't even see straight, like not even for a second. Like the room was spinning worse than your worst case of drinking. Like it was horrible. And then the neuropathy at that point was not just in my fingers, it had spread to my chest. So every time I took a deep breath, I just remember it felt like somebody was stabbing me with knives, like millions of knives. So that was, I'd say, the worst. And that was when he decided to take me to and gastroparesis. I had temporary gastroparesis with the throwing up. I couldn't digest food, like not even like soup. I couldn't have anything. I would just throw it up. And so that day he took me like speeding at 90 miles an hour to the neurologist. And I remember I was like on the verge of like being unconscious in his car. I was like throwing up out the window, couldn't see straight, couldn't feel anything. Like I was just on fire everywhere. Oh yeah, and my scalp and my skin were on fire. That first week was like, I just thought I was going to die. I just had no idea what was happening. It's scary to look at your father who's been a doctor for 40 years and he can't tell you what's wrong. I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is it. Nobody can save me. But after that, I will tell you, I felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest. I couldn't work out, and I love to work out. Couldn't work out for like months after that. It really wasn't until I took an antifungal pill that I first started to see the major shift, like the major turnaround. And I was on binders the whole time, like every kind of binder under the sun to help pull out the mycotoxins that get lodged in you. And, but the antifungals, I would say, was like the major game changer for me.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you found something that works for you, because that could be a journey in and of itself, trying to figure out which supplements to take and which are going to work for you. And, you know, the ones working for your friends don't necessarily always mean they're going to work for you. So glad you finally found something that worked well for you. How did it impact your life and just your ability to do every normal day activities?
Well, it impacted our life because my kids missed so much school. My teachers I could just feel them thinking like, what is wrong with that family? They're always sick. They're never here. I explain mold, but you explain mold, but unless you went through this, nobody truly understands what you're talking about. So that was weird. Living in hotels that whole year was weird. But as far as what I could do, I felt like I had the flu for 1.5 years. I was so fatigued. I was miserable. I like the thought of taking my kids to school and coming home was like crossing the desert or something. It was like so intense because I had no energy. Then we moved to this house and I thought things would turn around, but I still couldn't even go for a walk. Like I had nothing to give. I had no energy at all. But I would say a year out of there, things started to turn around. But, that summer, I remember going on vacation at the beach and I would react. There was mold at this one beach house. I saw a little bit of it on the air conditioning vent. But before I saw it, my neuropathy would come back if I'm near mold. And so I really don't know if neuropathy is like some sort of mast cell activation type thing, but my immune system remembers mold. And if I go near mold, but especially that year, if I went near mold, the neuropathy would come back. So I was kind of horrified, and we came to this house and we got like 5 inspections done. We put like UV lights in all the air conditioning vents. I got a huge HEPA air filter. But it scars you and you're constantly looking for mold because you're on self-defense mode 24/7. And you do have to learn how to trust, because your body cannot heal unless it lets go of the danger. Like you have to trust that you're safe again. And I remember like walking by myself and like listening to music and making that decision that I wouldn't be so paranoid and that I would trust the house and let things go. And, whatever happens, happens. But that's a huge part of healing, because if you stay like in this fight or flight and you're constantly worried, you're constantly afraid to go to the grocery store, you're constantly afraid that you're going to see mold in an air conditioning vent, you're never going to heal.
Yeah, no, it's good, valuable information. I appreciate that advice. I think that's important advice, because you do have to do everything that you can and kind of let go a bit and start to trust that your body's going to heal. Because if you're constantly in that frame of mind that if you don't, see something that, you're never going to heal properly, I mean, that's, it's going to put you down a dark path. So
Totally.
Appreciate that. Do you remember like the worst day? And for some people it's a day, but some people it's a time period. But do you remember the worst day or time period? And what was that like?
There were 2, I'd say, time periods. Right before the guy told me to move out, the choking spells. When I say choking spells, I mean like the only thing I kept telling every doctor I saw was, this isn't normal. I go to sleep and I feel like I'm being waterboarded, like literally. And I guess because I was also sleeping under mold, under the vent, but I felt like, it was my throat closing up or my chest just forgot to expand. Like there was something not working correctly. I felt like I was being suffocated to death while being alive. And it would only happen at night when I would go to sleep in my room. So I don't know if that was like limbic dysfunction looking back, or if it was literally, I don't really know what caused it, or if it was some severe like inflammation here or sinus. And I don't know what it was, but that was the worst thing I think I've ever gone through in my entire life. And then that week when I moved into my father's place, and, you know, I mean, between taking each breath and feeling like you're being stabbed to death, and then like literally you can't even take one step. And then my whole skin and head was on fire, like literally on fire. I mean, my nerves were just going spastic. I mean, spastic, and nobody knew like how to help you. So you have that fear, like, am I going to die? Like, what is this? Those were the two most traumatic weeks of my life.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that you went through that. I know that it was an easy time to go through and to relive that just now and kind of think about all that. It adds a little bit of stress, I'm sure. Yeah, but yeah, no, it's interesting because like nobody ever has the same type of reaction, the same symptoms. So it's really important to kind of cover that. You know, I'm sure there'll be people that have experienced some type of similarity, but you know, it's really interesting when you get to interview people and ask like, what did you go through and what was it like? Because it's so wildly different, and it's crazy how real this is, right? Let's turn the corner here. When did you finally start to feel better?
So we moved into this house and I started antifungals. I did like diflucan, I did itraconazole, and I did nystatin. So, I mean, I think looking in hindsight, and I got a bunch of tests done, not your typical, you know, Western tests, but all the tests that integrative doctors do to get a little bit more clues. You know, every test I did show that I had some sort of mycotoxin in me or I had fungus in me. Wow. So I think I hit it from the draining the mycotoxins out, and then I hit it from, and I also had to go on antibiotics for sinus infections. But between all the antibiotics of the world and all the antifungals of the world, it was really the antifungals that once I got in my system, I like had energy again. I could start to run again. I started going back to the gym. And then I also realized during that journey, wow, like sweating at the gym or sweating in a sauna is huge because your skin is your largest organ, and that's its largest way to detox is sweat. That is the only way to get it out of your system. But when you're sick,
fantastic.
You can't move, you don't feel like sweating. So
you don't want to sweat. Yeah. When you're not feeling well, you're not going to want to go sit in the sauna or go running.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally can understand that. Well, I'm glad that you turned that corner. I'm guessing you also got out of the mold. You fixed that?
We fixed it. Unlike the people, which I will say, who, didn't tell us about the leak and we bought the house from. Yeah, I hope karma is a beautiful thing. But anyways, we fixed it. We spent about $50,000 fixing it. And then just to put it, up for sale, because for me, my body was so reactive. Even when it was fixed, I couldn't move back in. We had to just move. If I even went near the house, I started to get that vein thing where my veins would start turning like a bluish black color. And I was like, nope, can't do it. So.
Yeah, no, and some people, unfortunately, even when the problem's fixed, just the emotional stress of what that caused, it can be hard to stay there unless you absolutely are in love with the place, the best location in the world. For some people, it's like, you know what, I'm going to fix this so no one else gets sick, but I'm walking away. So I can understand that.
Well, and I would actually wonder about your opinion on duct cleaning, because we got the ducts cleaned in there, and I swear I took a turn for the worst after the ducts got cleaned. And I think it was just because it was so bad. Like what was in there was so bad. And I think they didn't do a good job of getting all of it. So it kind of just woke up a sleeping lion. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, you know what an ERMI is, like the test?
Yeah.
Okay. You should watch my ERMI video after this, because I think it'll kind of explain a little bit about what you experienced. But essentially what had happened was they cleaned all these ducts, and all of that stuff billows out in the environment. And they may have missed stuff too. But so if you don't clean the ducts and then clean the house right after, when you come in there, you're like in Desert Storm. I mean, it's everywhere, right? Because, and I think that's part of the problem. So, you know, like when I'm working with people and duct cleaning sometimes is an important endeavor to making sure that it's part of the healing journey. You know, there's an order of which you need to do things. And if you don't do it in the proper sequence, from a medical standpoint, you're going to be introducing your body back to sometimes even more particles than when you started. Those particles entering the body in the form of spores or mycotoxins, for example, are going to really cause a significant relapse. So you got to really be careful about which order you do things in. And so it sounds like you probably just listened to whatever expert that you were working with at the time, and they probably just missed out on that small little very important detail that would have been helpful for you.
Totally. And I just think it also depends on the person's how hyper reactive their immune system was. And mine was like psycho, like crazy hyper reactive. So I had to go somewhere like where there was like nothing in the air to heal.
Yeah. So when you're hyper reactive like that, and I deal with a lot of people that are, you really have to go above and beyond and make a lot more difficult decisions than you normally would. So, if you ever have a mold problem in the future, now that you know me, we'll be able to help you out.
Totally. It's good to know. and it helps you heal, knowing that the right people if this happens.
Exactly. Again. Anxiety is gone. You know the right team now. We'll get you buttoned up if there's ever a problem. I mean, look, the reality of it is, unfortunately, statistically speaking, once out of every 10 years, we're bound to have some sort of water event. And so staying on top of it and handling it quickly is really what's going to be effective in controlling it, because, it's in hindsight, you didn't really have the knowledge previously to act quickly, to inspect for these types of things. Now you do. So with the right team in place, you'll always be in good hands. So it's great that you have the awareness. And that's why it's so important for us. And what we're trying to accomplish here today is creating awareness that this is a big problem. It impacts so many people. And B, now that we accept the fact that it's a problem, we can do something about it. So staying on top of our air quality is huge. Having water damage is part of life, but knowing what to do when you have it is so pivotal, because now you can do something in a positive way instead of letting it become this harmful situation that impacts you. So, it's really awesome. But before we go here today, I want to ask, if you can say only one piece of advice to someone who may either have gone through or is going through similar challenges to what you went through, what would that single piece of advice be?
Listen to your instincts. Like if you go somewhere and you don't feel right, leave. If you talk to a doctor and it doesn't feel right, go to a different doctor. And if you take a supplement and it doesn't feel right, stop. Like you have a built-in system. My instincts is what got me, over through the Desert Storm and to the better side, against everyone's advice, against, my husband didn't believe in it in the beginning, against the doctors telling me, oh no, it's in your head, against, all this just pushback. And you just have to rely on your truth and what you know to be true and what feels right and doesn't feel right. So listen to that little voice in your head, and listen to your body, because your body knows when it's freaking out, when it's not.
Yeah, no, it's a great piece of advice. Really appreciate that. So how can, if somebody wanted to connect with you, and you said you're in nutrition now, so you're a nutritionist, and obviously you're using your awareness, your newfound awareness, to help others, I am sure, because an inflamed gut kind of goes hand in hand with the environment and things 100%. Like that. So would love to hear about, how people can connect with you. Should they like to connect with you next? And sure. You tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the nutrition world.
Yeah. So I knew I couldn't really go back to med school, although I have so much knowledge in medicine. I decided to become a nutritionist because a lot of the things that did help me, aside from prescription antifungals, besides that, everything else was natural and everything was a supplement, but you have to know there's a method, of course. You have to study it and know what works. And binders was huge. So I was just like, wow, there's so many people who can't afford or don't have insurance to pay these doctors right out of pocket. But really all you need to know is sometimes just a really good nutritionist. You don't always need prescription medication to get better. So I was like, this could be a great way for me to help people. And my niche would probably be with mold illness and mold patients. And I lived through it. I studied it for 2 years nonstop till 5 a.m. in the morning every night. It's safe to say this is my niche, and I feel confident about it, and looking forward to spreading awareness and helping people. So they can reach me. Sorry, my phone's going crazy. They can reach me on Instagram or my website's www.thepuremama.com, or Instagram, I'm the Pure Mama. Pure just for clean living, no toxins involved would be lovely.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all that you do now. You've turned obviously this tragedy and allowed it to empower you to help other people, which I love. And so thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for joining me here today, helping amplify this situation. And sharing your story is going to help do exactly that. Really appreciate you being vulnerable and kind of diving into this, because I know it's going to help change people in a very impactful way. So thank you.
Thank you. And I know who to reach out to the next time there's a problem. Speed it up.
That's it. Just reach out to the mold medic next time you have a mold issue, and for sure you'll get some good sound advice. No panic necessary. And I happen to be in Tampa, which is not too far away from Atlanta. But our team actually travels nationwide. All of which are trained by me and our team, and it's really beautiful to be able to help people, across the nation, and in this medically designed way that we do it. So awesome! Looking forward to maybe we'll be working together with some clients who really need help.
For sure, you never know.
Never know. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.